Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Jon Erlandson, Professor of Anthropology at the University of Oregon. His research and teaching interests include the archaeology of maritime societies, human evolution and migrations, the peopling of the Americas, and collaborative research with indigenous communities. Erlandson is also the Executive Director of the Museum of Natural and Cultural History at the U of O. The state legislature founded the museum in 1935 to help preserve, protect, and interpret important anthropology, archaeology, zoology, paleontology, and geology collections from Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. Over the years, the museum collections have expanded to include some of the most important specimens and historical documents in the Pacific Northwest. Particular focus has been on items documenting the region's traditional Native American cultures, but also include other cultural collections, such as archaeological specimens from Alaska and an extensive array of ethnographic items from Africa, Asia, and Oceania. The museum is currently in the midst of a three-phase expansion that is doubling the size of its exhibit halls and will culminate in a new research wing that will consolidate research labs now scattered around the U of O campus. One of the museum's current exhibits is titled Face to Face with Masks from the Museum Collections. On view until December 29, 2011, examples from North America, Africa, and Oceania explore the ways masks have been part of the human experience throughout history. Jon, welcome back to UO Today.
Thanks for having me, Barbara.
The last time you spoke on this program, it was with my predecessor in this chair, with Steve Shankman, and I'm very pleased that you've come back to talk to me this time.
Thanks. I'm glad to come back to talk about the museum.
I know there's lots to talk about. You've been director for 6 years now, right? You came on board in 2005?
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of the museum? It's quite a venerable institution on this campus.
Yeah, it really is. You referred already to it being created in 1935. We're celebrating our 75th birthday this year. We actually had 2 years of a birthday because the Museum of Anthropology was created in 1935. And then in 1936, the mission was expanded to the Museum of Natural History, and the two were combined. I've lately been talking more about an even deeper history of the museum, though, because the museum has a paleontology division. It's known as the Condom Collection, which used to be the Condom Museum here on campus. And it came to the U of O in 1876 with Dr. Thomas Condon, who was one of the three first professors at the U of O. So really the history of the museum is as old as the history of the University of Oregon, and they're very closely intertwined together.
That gives it a unique role on this campus. It's unlike any of the other collections or museums or galleries that have been started in more recent years. Mm-hmm. You also, therefore, have a tie to the state of Oregon, right, or an obligation or a responsibility to the state.
We do. We're the official repository for archaeological, anthropological, and paleontological collections from state lands. And we also curate a lot of collections from federal lands as well. So the mission really is to preserve and protect some of those really important and significant collections in perpetuity, and to share them with the public.
So how does that happen? How are unexpected finds made these days? How do you get that material, I guess?
Well, a lot of our materials come from current archaeological research that's being done all over the state. We have an archaeological research division that works very closely with federal and state agencies, including the Oregon Department of Transportation. Because there are federal and state laws that protect important historical and archaeological sites, we have archaeologists that go out and work in advance of bridges and highway construction, other transportation and state and federal developments. Those projects then generate archaeological collections that we have a responsibility to curate, as I said, forever. And that's a big responsibility, and forever is a long time.
It is, and it means you need the facilities to do it properly.
Definitely.
I'm curious, in the 6 years since you took over there as executive director, have there been any important finds near here or elsewhere in the state? Oh,
there have been huge finds, and museum staff are right in the middle of many of them. Maybe the biggest one is Dennis Jenkins' work at Paisley Caves, where Luther Cressman, who created the Department of Anthropology and the museum, in the 1930s. He worked there decades ago and made some startling discoveries and startling claims that were really dismissed by most scholars around the nation at the time. And what Dennis is finding, and it's now become famous, is in Parade magazine and National Geographic magazine, finding human remains, human coprolites or fossilized feces that contain human DNA, and they're dated to over 14,000 years, which is older than Clovis, which for decades, really most of the 20th century, was thought to be the culture that was the first Americans. Well, now we know there were people here before that, and some of the most important evidence comes from the state of Oregon and was discovered by our own staff. So it's very exciting.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Dennis Jenkins a couple of years ago on this show, and at that point there was still some contesting of those findings, but it sounds as though in the last couple of years all of the data has been double-checked and it's now pretty much accepted fact.
I think it's widely accepted. There may still be some skeptics, but Madonna Moss, my wife, and I were involved in a field conference, it was a year and a half ago, with some of the top archaeologists, Paleo-Indian archaeologists in the nation. And Dennis and his collaborators, his team, opened up all the trenches and revealed all the evidence, and there wasn't a single person who left that conference with any doubt about the veracity of his finds.
So,
very impressive.
Pardon the pun, but this is groundbreaking research coming out of...
Groundbreaking research, no doubt.
That one came out inadvertently, I'm sorry. John, the museum's been housed at its current site since 1987. You've got that beautiful building from the exterior. It's just a prize on that end of campus. But it's too small. You outgrew it, or perhaps it was never adequate in the first place.
That would be true.
Is that true? It was started on a low budget, I understand, and perhaps wasn't even adequate in the 80s?
It was barely adequate in the 80s, and only for our anthropological collections. During the 70s, a previous economic downturn, the university really tried to dispose of most of the museum and many of its collections. An herbarium went away. The Condom Paleontological Collection was dispersed over to geology, where it was taken care of with virtually no funds for 25 years by Bill and Liz Orr. And the Anthropological Collection stayed, and those became the core of the Museum of Natural History. In 1987, that new building was built to house most of our anthropological collections, but we've had collections out in scattered outbuildings around campus, and we've had researchers scattered all over campus in 10 different buildings other than our headquarters for decades. So we're in the midst of a kind of a landmark expansion that I wrote a strategic plan with the help of my staff in 2006 that governed our next 10 years. And it called for this 3-phase expansion. It was blessed by everybody on campus, from the provost to the president's office, and we've been working really hard to make that expansion reality.
There have already been significant steps taken, right? Can you talk about the new exhibit space?
Yes, I can. Well, let me just tell you that it's a $9.5 million expansion of capital construction.
The 3 phases?
The 3 phases, and we're right in the midst of it. So the first phase was a new Anthropological Collection Center. We built 2 vaults that will now house all of our anthropological collection in one facility. It was a expansion of the existing museum to the east. At the same time, we added a public galleria that was funded largely by the Ford Family Foundation with help from the Oregon Cultural Trust and other friends of the museum. And it's a beautiful space. It allows us to almost double our exhibition space, but also to have a variety of events and exhibits. There's a wonderful one now, a photographic exhibit that's traveled from the Burke Museum in Washington called The Last Polar Bear, that explores global warming and its effect on Arctic environments and iconic species like polar bears. And we've had concerts and events in there, and that was built and completed about 2 years ago. We moved our old collections, the anthropological collections, out of a vault into these 2 new vaults. And then we've now renovated that old vault into future exhibition space. So the second phase of the expansion will more than double our exhibit space, and we're in the midst of creating a new exhibit hall that's dedicated to the geology and natural history of Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And it's almost funded. We're at about 85% of the funding that we need to do it. We've accomplished the renovation, we've done the conceptual designs, and this summer we'll start the detailed design work and move ahead with installation.
One of the details that I was fascinated by when I was reading your plans and the history of the expansion so far is the whole question of how you display materials and the kinds of cases that were there, the kinds of display cases you have purchased and then perhaps have rethought. Are there trends in the display and the kind of museology of an anthropological collection that you're having to deal with?
Well, yeah, I mean, museology is a very, and exhibit design, they're very, very rapidly changing fields, and there's all these new technologies, as you know, that are being developed. Museums around the world are going more and more towards interactive exhibits, where you don't just come in and look at objects, but you can actually get involved in an exhibition and provide feedback and high technology, so touchscreen technologies. It's kind of ironic because they're expensive and there's a lot that can go wrong, and so in designing the new exhibit hall, we've tried to consider what worked at some museums and what didn't work at other museums. I've seen quite a few museums in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, elsewhere in North America, and we've taken kind of a middle ground that takes advantage of some of that technology, but it's the tried and true technology that 50 fifth graders can come in and interact with, or 50 eighth graders, and not be breaking all the time. We want everything to be functioning and hardy as well as educational and interactive.
So there's a lot of planning going on at the same time, even while you're also raising the money to do this, correct?
There is, and I am not a museum exhibits person, so we have a terrific staff that designs the exhibits and installs the exhibits. We often bring graduate students in to work with us as interns, as GTFs. We have undergraduate volunteers. We have faculty consultants that work on many of our exhibits. And that allows us really to interact with a variety of different programs and departments on campus, which I think is really integral to our, the strength of our museum.
When you came to U of O as a professor in anthropology, had you ever envisaged that you might end up being executive director of the museum?
I never had, no. Although I will say, the place that I first got interested in archaeology and anthropology was at a natural history museum where I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. And so it did feel a little bit like coming home. And I remember Mel Akins, who was one of my mentors here, and he kind of corralled me and said, "You're going to be the next director of the museum." And I said, "Okay." And I went over and I asked him, "Mel, what do I need to know? What do I do as museum director?" Because I had no background in museums. And he pointed at the director's chair and he said, "John, just sit in that chair and you'll be the director." As if it would all become clear. I think I have administrative strengths and research strengths that have helped me a lot. I've run a lot of large archaeological projects, but the fact is that Mel left the museum in very good shape with a really fine staff, and I've learned to listen and trust my staff. They're terrific.
So you had the logistical experience, you knew how to run a big operation, but it sounds as though you've really had to assemble a team of people, each with a very particular set of strengths, to really oversee all the phases of this.
Yeah, I think that's true. Even our current exhibit, Face to Face, it took 20 different staff members when you count the graduate student interns and many volunteers as well. And so every time we put on an exhibit, it really is a project. It involves multiple people and interaction with multiple programs on campus.
I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to tell me more about Face to Face, but I wanted to get back to the third phase of the expansion, and I'm assuming that that's the new research wing.
That's correct. The third phase, we anticipate being done with Phase 2, the new exhibit hall, within about 12 to 18 months, and we'll probably install it in phases as we test and prototype different components of it. But as soon as that really gets underway, then I will work really hard we have a funding plan. It's a public-private partnership, although it's mostly public funds if all the stars align. And it will build a new research wing that will finally consolidate all the museum operations under not so much one roof, but in one complex. So instead of having 10 or 11 buildings and people and collections scattered all over campus, we'll have one larger museum complex which I think will be a lot more efficient. And really, I think then people will really understand that this bigger footprint represents the kind of larger mission of the museum, which many people miss because we think that the museum is just that one relatively small building.
What are those 10 different units? How much ground are we talking about covering here in terms of fields or kinds of expertise?
Well, we have 4 divisions. We have our Anthropological collections. We have Archaeological Research Division. We have a Paleontology Division, which is the Condom Collection plus researchers. And then we have public programs that really is the educational exhibits, visitor services, really the public outreach arm of the museum. I think the total staff, it fluctuates depending on how much field work we're doing at any given time, but it's 50, 60 people usually. It's a complex operation.
And more than 100 volunteers, I read.
And more than 100 volunteers, that's right.
Is the volunteer coordination and training also run out of your center, at your central building?
Yeah, out of the headquarters. That's part of the public programs division in the education department.
So I gather that the footprint of the physical buildings is actually continuing to expand throughout all the way through to the end of phase 3?
Yes.
Is it a problem of land in that area? You're across from the dorms, there's a parking lot behind you. How are you managing to fit these new buildings into that space?
Well, we initially wanted to stay a one-story complex. And with the new dorm, the East Campus Residence Hall, which has risen behind us, it's 5 stories. And we're not unhappy because it's bringing lots of students. I mean, one of the nice things about the museum's location is we used to be on the edge of campus, but the center of gravity on campus has really moved eastward, and so we're in the thick of things. And having 500 students right behind us, we'll have more and more interaction with students who we're primarily here to serve. It has created a little bit of a space crunch, and what we're now doing is redoing our conceptual designs from a 1-story building for the research wing to a 2-story. There are added costs to that. You have to put in elevators and things like that. But I think ultimately it'll fit in better with the surrounding landscape, and we've done the analysis, and it looks like we've got adequate space to accommodate everything and have some space for future expansion under some later director.
I see. Right. I'm sure you will have done your job if and when you bring this one home. Jon, you mentioned that students were your primary audience, but you must also draw a lot of visitors from the community and also visitors to Oregon, because you really are a very important cultural site for the Pacific Northwest. Do you have any statistics or any general sense of what the breakdown is of your visitors? How many are U of O faculty, staff, and students, and how many community folks?
We do keep all those statistics. I'm not sure I have them all at hand. We had about 22,000 visitors last year, although that includes attendance at some of our external events, at lectures and things like that. Probably about 8,000 of those visitors come from the surrounding community as K-12 students. There are lots and lots of tours, and our education department has done a great job of interfacing with local teachers and schools. We've had banks and other supporters who have helped us, help pay for buses, because the schools are so strapped that sometimes the only thing that keeps them from coming is not being able to pay for the bus. But U of O students all get in for free. We hold a number of classes there. We have classes from departments all over campus that send their students to look at one aspect of our exhibits or another. And certainly there's a lot of research that goes on by faculty on campus and visiting scholars as well, coming to see many of our collections. And then I'm not quite sure how many external visitors we get, tourist visitors, but it's substantial. Cultural tourism has grown a lot. And I think as we open this new exhibit hall and basically double the total size of our exhibits, it'll allow us to get more and more of our collections in front of the public. And so I'm guessing that our impact on tourism will grow substantially. There's a really interesting connection. The Ice Age Floods Trail, which was designated by Congress just a year or so ago, is not actually a walking trail. It's a series of highway trails, and Eugene is one of the gateway cities, all the way from Missoula, Montana to Spokane to Eugene. And these huge floods that came down the Columbia River at the end of the Pleistocene, some people think there were as many as 25 or 30 of them, and they were truly cataclysmic. And it's an extraordinary story, and it shaped the Willamette Valley in many, many ways. This is one of the stories that we'll tell in the new exhibit hall. But that Ice Age Floods interpretive trail, I think, will also bring in new visitors to Eugene, because it's just a phenomenal geological story.
And it's a multi-state story then, so Oregon will participate in this with Montana and Idaho at least,
and
right?
Washington,
And Washington.
Yeah.
In that new exhibit space, Jon, is it your primary motivation to get more of the permanent collection on display, or does it also allow you to have space for touring exhibits?
Well, I think the primary goal is to get more of our collections in front of the public, especially our paleontological collections. But as we do that, we'll be taking some of those out of the existing exhibit hall, where past is present, Oregon where past is present. And so that frees up some additional spaces to program as we wish, and we haven't decided exactly what we'll do in those spaces yet. It'll probably open up some space for us to highlight recent donations to the museum. We continue to get amazing things donated to the museum almost every month, sometimes every week. And we'd like to share those with the public. So this larger expansion really is going to accomplish, I think, a number of goals for us. And it's very exciting.
It is really exciting. It must be a great luxury to have flexible space and be able to brainstorm and do more than just show a little bit of what you have at once.
Yeah, that's our goal.
Jon, let's go back to the mask exhibit, if you will, face to face. You've got a beautiful poster up, and the show is already open. It runs through into December of this year, so I'm hoping a lot of our viewers will take the chance to drop in. If I'm correct, these masks are all already part of the museum collection. Is that correct?
Virtually all of them, yeah. There are a few surprises in there, modern masks, that might not be part of our collections, but the core of it, 53 masks from our museum collections.
53 masks, and I gather that they represent a whole wide range of chronological periods and cultures, too.
They do. I mean, they're predominantly ethnographic, so primarily from the last 100 to 200 years. The ones that we're featuring, this is about half the masks that the museum owns, and we've really played to the strengths of the museum collection. So we've got North America, a lot of masks from the Pacific Northwest. We've got Oceania, which includes Polynesian masks and also some just stunning masks from New Guinea. And then also Africa. We have substantial holdings from Africa, and there are some beautiful masks from Africa.
Do you know where those masks came from? Were they given to the collection as a parcel of items, or?
Well, a variety of different gifts over the years. Some of these were given, almost 100 years ago. In some cases, even before the museum might have existed as a museum of anthropology. But a lot of them come from faculty who over the years have done research in Africa or Oceania or Asia or North America and have collected masks either as part of their research or just as part of their own enjoyment of masks, and then donated them to the museum through time. We also have been, in the last few years, creating a lot of web galleries that highlight our collections, both zoological, fossils, artifacts, ethnographic objects. We focus on Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, but we're also highlighting our collections from around the world. And we've noticed that as we put those galleries up, then people around the world literally become more aware of what we hold. And if they deciding to get rid of something that maybe their parents bequeathed to them, we're getting more of those inquiries. Would you like these masks? Would you like these woven sandals from Eastern Oregon? And so it's interesting that what we put on the web then shapes the nature of future gifts.
So each of these web galleries is available as a link from the homepage of the museum?
Yes, under collections, and I think there's about 30 of them now.
Wow, so you must have a lot of staff time going into the development of those websites.
We did. We have for 2 or 3 years. A lot of it was funded by the Ford Family Foundation to help teachers and students across the state be able to access our collections and learn from them.
It's a great way to make Oregon collections more visible on the East Coast, in the Southwest and the Southeast. So we're so far geographically removed from so many other major collections. Mm-hmm. This is a wonderful tool, it seems to me.
It is. And it also tells researchers what we have and encourages them to come and use these collections. And it expands the influence of the museum from local or regional to truly global.
You mentioned all the gifts that come in unexpectedly often. Do you also purchase items for the collection?
We do not purchase items. It's policy, in fact. People do occasionally try to sell us things, and we just tell them, no, we don't purchase objects. We sometimes have donors who might purchase a basket from a current Native American weaver, for instance. We don't just collect things from the past. These are living traditions oftentimes, and we want to continue collecting objects as we move into the future and as they change through time. So occasionally we will have somebody buy us something, but we don't purchase antiquities or any of those things that raise some really difficult moral and ethical issues.
I can understand that that's a good policy for any number of reasons.
Yeah, works for us.
John, we're running out of time, so we're going to have to close in just a minute. I wanted to just say how beautiful I think the newly renovated space is. My department hosted a function over there the other day, and it reminded me what a beautiful resource your buildings are, as well as the collections. So, well done, and I can't wait to see it as it continues to evolve.
Thank you, and thank you for supporting the face-to-face exhibit. We really appreciate it.
We're delighted. I hope you have a big influx of people around Halloween and well before then as well.
I suspect we will.
Great.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thanks for coming. We have been speaking with Jon Erlandson, Executive Director of the Museum of Natural and Cultural History at the University of Oregon. The museum will soon undergo a further expansion to create new research facilities. The exhibit, titled Face to Face with Masks from the Museum Collections, runs through December 29th, 2011. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.